the village shouldn't be only trying to step in when a young person is a teenager, because at that point, I would say, things have got way too late.
You've seen stuff. You don't have to tell us necessarily.
High extreme levels of violence. I won't necessarily go into detail because I think it's quite hard for myself as well as other people to possibly hear, but this is unusual. It's actually quite a normal experience for many young boys in particular, and actually I would say young black boys in particular growing up in London. Things have shifted in exposure to violence, more so now I would say because of carrying mobile phones.
Welcome to another edition of Peckham Podcast. With me today I've got an award-winning clinical psychologist, lives North London, based in Peckham, been working here a year, has loads of credentials, serious qualifications, running 3 jobs I think at the moment, but we may find out there's more. It's a privilege to sit down with a guy. You're still a fairly young fellow, aren't you? I know you're in your 30s, Ron, but you've obviously been busy. You've got an absolute hatful of qualifications. Why so? Why this direction of travel? And tell us what it is you've become a specialist in.
I'm a persistent man. I guess I always knew I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, probably from college days. Always been a big thinker around how people behave, always been fascinated behind intentions and motives behind people's behaviour. So at college, I was wanting to choose subjects that would accommodate and nurture that drive and motivation that I had. So I actually studied really random subjects: psychology, sociology and philosophy.
Well, that sounds very focused, actually.
When you think about it, yes. Yeah.
You knew when you were at college, I'm going to become a clinical psychologist. That what you knew that?
No. I kind of knew I wanted to enter the psychology realm.
Right.
There were various different domains within the psychology world.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had no idea. I kind of just knew I wanted to be a psychologist, but that was largely based on having an amazing psychology teacher who really prompted me to think about things, maybe more so than my philosophy or sociology teacher. So I could have gone down either route, to be fair.
Right.
But psychology felt more applicable, especially based on what I was witnessing in my own kind of private life when it comes to community violence.
Right. So a deep thinker from early doors.
Agreed.
Where does that go back as far as you can?
Yeah.
Where are you when you first think, I like thinking?
Probably primary school, actually. Big love for learning. And I remember my mum had quite a mixed reaction to it. She, on the one hand, she loved the fact that I was always wanting to be curious and understand why things operate the way they do. On the other hand, probably got quite frustrated at me being so curious. But no, definitely primary school. And actually from a young age, I was exposed to lots of difference, which I think also nurtured that curiosity. So I come from a very working class background, but during primary school I was exposed to middle class families, just because my school was very diverse. And in the local area where I grew up, Wandsworth, I had middle class friends who didn't live too far away from me, so I was very much exposed to just different lifestyles, which also made me curious.
How many of you at home?
Family wise, just me, mum, younger brother.
Right, 2 boys.
Yeah.
Did you 2 fight? Did you
Of
play?
course, boys do.
Yeah. I know. Rite of passage.
Yeah. And he's only 2 years younger, so he's not that much younger. So I guess because we felt quite close in age, that might have caused tensions in itself.
Right. So did you give mum a hard time?
Of course. Yeah.
That's the job, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the older I've got, the more I've been able to mentalise my mum and understand the things that she did as a result of raising 2 boys ultimately in London as well.
Well, you're figuring it out retrospectively.
Of course. Yeah.
Did she live around? Are you still? Do you meet up?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Mum's still around, brother's still around. Yeah. So they both still live in South London.
Oh, okay.
So I'm the only one that's migrated to North.
Yeah. No, we forgive you.
I don't know if other people do.
Really? I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? It is a different world. I've always liked living south because if I want to go to anything, it usually involves crossing the river.
100%.
And the river in London is such a glorious thing.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, look at all this.
But even South London is so different in that South East, I find, is very different from South West London. They have very different identities, and I guess I've always been a South West Londoner that now operates within the South East, and it's been interesting just to see the differences.
Yeah, I'm kind of proud of being a long-term resident here in Peckham. And Clapham and Wandsworth, I don't know.
Yeah, it is a different ballgame.
It's not they have two heads or anything, but it is. What do you discern in kind of localized differences?
Great question. I think the prominent nature of the violence when I was growing up felt quite different, actually, from Southwest and Southeast. I felt that actually Southeast London was a bit more volatile and chaotic with its level of violence. Don't get me wrong, there was still stuff going on in Southwest London that was quite horrific. But I remember at a younger age thinking to myself, I can't go to Southeast London, that feels very dangerous.
When I first came to Peckham, taxi drivers wouldn't want to come here.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm still doing some tele work, so I could afford a taxi. I don't take taxis now. But they wouldn't come here.
Yeah.
I'd say, Camberwell Green, do you mind turning left a bit?
Yeah.
I'd usually get them to my house, but yeah, it was a big aura Peckham had.
Agreed.
Yeah. So you somehow, what really socially projected you towards this dedication to the field of youth violence?
Oh, right,
How did that focus settle on you?
It's fascinating because I don't even refer to it as youth violence. I often refer to it as community violence. I guess more so with the acknowledgement of how it impacts various people systemically.
It ripples in all directions,
100%.
doesn't it?
And it's often involving people who may or may not know each other. I think the level of violence is so insidious that it feels quite limiting to refer to as just youth violence. So I often refer to it as community violence. But my drive, my passion for it, I guess very much came from my own lived experience, more so from my teenage years. So I often talk about South London generally, and then South West London having quite high levels of gang-affiliated violence and murder during my teenage years. So I can remember quite, actually from 2003 to like 2010, the violence was all over the place. And because I grew up in Wandsworth, if you know the geographical landscape of Wandsworth and the at the time the prominent gangs in the area, you had one gang that operated in Tooting and Mitcham, called TZ, Terror Zone, great names, and then in the other end you had SUK, Stick Up Kids, who operated in Clapham Junction and Battersea. So again, if you understand geography, Wandsworth is the middle ground. So those two rival gangs often had to pass through Wandsworth to enact violence to one another, which meant that I was often exposed to and seeing violence that as a young boy should never have been exposed to.
And is that experience why we see the word trauma in accounts of what you do?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think there's something about how I was able to, I guess now, understand the things that I was doing to survive, as well as what my peers were doing for self-preservation and survival.
Okay, let's stick with you. What were you doing?
But I guess it's just the avoidance, the typical trauma. I say typical. People might not know how typical it is, but hypervigilance being a big one.
Right.
I guess that constant feeling of on edge and trying to scan and detect threats, because my nervous system is so dysregulated based on what I've seen that I'm constantly on the lookout trying to understand, could this be a potential threat? Could that be a potential threat?
Yeah.
Which then meant that you're just never at peace.
So you lived on high alert?
Of course. Yeah. And I noticed that my friends did as well. So that would then impact avoidance, where we would not go to particular places, or we take particular routes to places. And even though that feels quite adaptive, it's still a trauma response, that you're going out of your way to massively shift what you're doing because of the fear of what could occur.
2005, you were primary school still?
Oh, no, 2005 secondary school.
So you were in secondary school? Because I got a chance to work with local police in Southwark, doing a big project on knife crime, and acquainted because I didn't have that experience growing up. I grew up outside London, and there was no gang presence at all, and we're talking a few decades back, so drug culture hadn't permeated. So I sometimes look at what you're describing, and I'm curious, if you think of it like a plant that has grown over time, and it's now throttling communities and housing estates in particular, is a feeling I've got. And talked to a lot of young people in 2005, and then again about 15 years later had access for another big multi-year knife crime project, going to talk with young people in schools and youth clubs, and just listening to them. That was the brief I set fellow professionals, that let's go and listen, because whatever we're all doing isn't working. So, or is it whatever we're all doing is not enough? And on that kind of polarity, we set off and sat down and got them to chatter, and heard stories about what was being witnessed, and began to get a real first-hand sense, not having lived on estates or not having lived in terror zones, to coin a phrase, what it was to be that age, teenage, in that moment. So you've described it as there being no let up. Your whole body is flexed. Did you ever have, you've seen stuff, you don't have to tell us necessarily. I mean, I'm not worried about people, grown-ups, that are going to watch a discussion of this sort, but so if you feel it's helpful to describe for listeners and viewers one or two of the things you saw as a teenage boy, let's say, early teenage.
I think just I was going to say typical, or maybe it's typical, but typical high extreme levels of violence. I won't necessarily go into detail because I think it's quite hard for myself as well as other people to possibly hear. But I guess what I do want to articulate is that this isn't unusual. It's actually quite a normal experience for many young boys in particular, and actually I would say young black boys in particular growing up in London. Nowadays generally, I think things have shifted in exposure to violence, more so now I would say because of we're all carrying mobile phones. So we have that everyday exposure to traumatic events generally. Whereas when I was growing up, that was less of a concern. But I guess it was still an issue because I think we were more mobile. We were travelling around more when I was a teenager, which meant that we were going to areas that we weren't quite sure what the possible outcome could be.
I remember in 2005 talking with a young boy. He agreed to be filmed in this. A police sergeant had produced a question sheet, and according to the kind of yes/no answer, you took a different route through the flow of questions. And little Jimmy, call him, started off, with all the bravado. He must have been about 13, and he was a young 13. He hadn't, from his eyes, I'd say he hadn't been exposed to the darker end of it all. And he was of the feeling that it was cool to carry a knife. I'd carry a knife to defend myself. And he was very sure about that. And within the course of about 2 minutes, gently asking the next question and the next question, and exploring the reality. So, what happens if, you're hurt or somebody else is hurt? And how does that feel to your family? And what do your family think if you're in prison? And his face went through shades of grey, and oh God, it was so moving. And I felt at that point, 20 years back, that young people were perhaps still susceptible to logical argument. When I came back 15 years later, it felt like that had gone.
I don't know if it has gone. I think, so we've known for long periods of time that children's brain development is very different when they're a child or when they're a teen or an adolescent. We know that the brain's prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that manages consequences, that allows us to think and relate to other people, is still developing during people's teenage, adolescent years. We've known that. So with the example you gave, what was really key there is that you had adults speaking to a child to get them to understand the consequences. I think that's the difference here. I don't think that occurs enough with today's generation. They don't understand the consequences because their brains are still developing. So actually their brain functioning isn't wired up to think about what possible consequences could be. They're wired towards reckless and destructive behaviours. So they need adults around them to guide them ultimately.
Need intervention.
100%. But it needs to be from adults that are providing conclusions of what possible consequences could be. If a young person is carrying a knife, they're not thinking about the person that they might stab's family. That's just not going to happen.
No.
They're thinking about their own survival, self-preservation. So they need an outsider to bring that other narrative to the table for them to understand the different consequences.
Okay, so how do we mobilise adults, and who are they?
Well, that is a fantastic question, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I would say that should be anybody and everybody. And for me, it goes back to whenever I hear the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. If I'm honest, it personally winds me up, because I think a lot of people are ready to talk about village, but don't want to be a villager. And that is a big, big problem. In order for you to be a villager, you have to be ready to have these types of conversations with people, young people that you don't even know. I don't know if you've heard of there's another African proverb that I often attach to that if the child does not feel embraced by the village, they will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Wow.
And that, for me, is what we see in today's society. That children don't feel that they are members of society, so why would they then conform to society's rules if they don't feel like a valid member? It just doesn't make sense. So I often see young people's current behaviour as just a response to how they feel generally. Which means if we go back to the first proverb about it takes a village, we as adults need to do a lot of work to bring young people alongside with us so they feel that they're part of the village.
And we've got any number of things in the way, haven't we?
Huge number.
Sometimes it's an absence. I've got to ask you, where do you, as a clinical psychologist, sit on this issue of absent father?
Great question. For me, it becomes irrelevant if we stick to the topic of village. If one parent is missing, we know that if families still have that support system from other people, it doesn't even have to be family members, from other people generally, there's going to be less of an impact on that child's development, emotional development, their psychological development. So I think we get in very uncharted territories when we're focusing on absent fathers in particular. I think there's definitely a role for men, especially with young boys. So I think there's a role for fathers to be very present in the lives of young boys.
Well, it feels
very,
common
very
sense,
relevant.
doesn't it?
But if a father is missing, this is where, if the village is intact, then there are other male role models who can step in to provide that guidance. So this is where, when we focus on absent fathers solely, this is where I find it a bit tricky, because you then don't think about the systemic things that are missing that should be in place to mitigate whether mum or dad is not present anyway.
I mean, it seems relevant to me as a naive, because the village is structured, it has huts or houses, and you have a family in each unit.
Agreed, yeah.
And so if that family has, 2 plus 1, then the child that's the full complement as far as I understand it.
Yeah.
It takes a woman to bear a child and a man to fertilise the woman.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here.
You're talking about biology though.
But that's where it all starts, doesn't it? In that biological triangle, child and parents. And so if the village isn't awake to the absence of one or other parent,
agreed. Yeah.
Then we have a thing.
There can be problems. I agree with that completely.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How young does it become in your sense as a student of psychology and the practice of it? How young is it important for the village to be making an intervention?
As soon as the child is born.
Oh, right.
100%. As soon as the child is born, because at a young age, a baby is still, understanding their own internal sense of self, but also trying to understand who is around them through voice, through, the different senses, their vision, etc. So if they can hear multiple voices that are showing compassion, soothing, nurturing, then actually that's going to have a positive impact on that child.
Right.
100%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The village shouldn't be only trying to step in when a young person is a teenager, because at that point, I would say, things have got way too late.
Yeah. Yeah, because kids are being groomed for county lines when they're 8 years old or 7. Is that right?
I don't know about that young. So I work with young people who'd be more around 12, 13, 7, 8. I don't really work with that population that young. Possibly, but
Right.
I can't speak on that.
It's thrown out sometimes as a
Yeah.
line, so maybe there are one-offs. But so your experience says you're picking up young people for what, trauma therapy?
Yeah. So
As young as?
so I work with as young as 14, 15. Yeah.
Okay. And are these young people much like yourself who have always been a bystander and happened to see stuff?
No, not at all. No, not at all.
These are ones who've been involved.
Yeah, the full spectrum. So trauma doesn't discriminate. You can be a perpetrator, a victim, have witnessed it, have learned about it. You can still portray trauma responses as a result of that. So my work focuses on understanding that an individual can be both a victim and a perpetrator of violence. I think a lot of systems struggle with that binary because they only see one or the other. And actually, when you see one or the other, it negates the intervention of work that should be done for both sides of that identity.
I like that approach because it seems to be commonsensical, inclusive, and you're going to get opposites side by side a lot of the time.
100%. So I often, when I'm working with lots of different professionals in different settings, I will speak to them about which identity do they accommodate more than the other. So the criminal justice system really only sees the perpetrator identity, which then means that they're not thinking about the victim identity that the individual might hold. When I work with NHS professionals, for example, I often find they only see the victim identity and don't see the perpetrator side. So systems, for me anyway, are very much set up to only work with one or the other, as opposed to see both.
There's a mainstream media element here. It plays on my mind because that's where my work life took me. It likes to simplify things, and it tends to the negative in a significant way. Do you have any views on mainstream media's influence on younger forming minds? Whether it's television, cinema,
I don't think it's even just
video.
on the minds of young people. I think generally. So I think I'll answer your question systematically from society down to the individual. So for me, the media plays a huge part in the narratives it sells to the general person in society when they think about community violence, when they think about gang violence. Whenever I lecture to trainee clinical psychologists, I do quite a quick exercise to demonstrate this, where I ask them to go onto Google and type in gang-affiliated London and see what comes up. Black and brown faces. That's what you will see when you put that into Google. So I do that as quite a quick example to showcase that the media's powerful presence to dictate what the general person will have in mind when they think about community violence or when they think about gang violence, which then has an impact on when you see a group of black boys walking towards you, the visceral physical response you will have, your nervous system being activated, your threat response being activated because you've seen that. And there's something about, I guess, reminding people that it isn't always based on their own stuff. It's the stuff they've absorbed from the media and society that's telling them you need to fear these people. So that's one aspect of things, which I have a big issue with the media. Of course, when it comes to young people, they're no different. They're absorbing all of these narratives. So when it goes back to the proverb I mentioned about the child burning down the village, well, if a young person sees that the media is portraying people that look like them, villainizing them, ostracizing them, why would the young person then feel they want to be a member of society? So the media has played a massive part in creating a huge division between young people and their desire to feel included within society.
Right.
So that's one aspect, another aspect of it. And then I don't know if your question was more alluding to young people maybe absorbing stuff they see in media and how that might impact them. I don't know where your mind was going.
I wasn't actually specifying in my own mind at that moment any particular avenue because it is a very much 360 degree thing. But the influence, I think the broad influence that has a negative characteristic is undeniable, and that reaches in different directions that you've just been illustrating. So adults will be, and young people will be ill-informed to the extent that many are now nervous,
100%.
even if they've had no direct experience.
100%.
Going back to what I said earlier about being in Peckham and taxi drivers not wanting to come here. I never felt nervous walking around Peckham, strangely. I suppose I didn't need to walk through housing estates that I didn't know. So the main streets that I was on, all the shopping areas that I would go to normally, they were all cool.
How old were you? Because I think age is a huge part.
I was an adult. Yeah, working man.
Yeah. So I find that now, as a 34-year-old man, I can go anywhere. But as a 15-year-old boy, there is no way I would have felt comfortable to travel anywhere. I think there's something about how age almost removes you from the perceived threat that could occur.
Totally, yeah. I was doing some filming with a group of young guys they'd done a dance project, and they created a fantastic live performance around the idea. They had two performers playing the same person, and they followed consequences. And the guy gets his phone stolen, and he either shrugs his shoulders, goes home, tells his mum, "Lost my phone." She says, "Oh well, we'll do what we can." And the other one gets really wound up and
does something.
And he makes some bad choices. And so the two versions of the same kid.
That's powerful.
Worked really well. And I agreed to do a sort of a quick shoot, and we got there. I think it edited to about 15 minutes. And we started off around the cinema here in Peckham, just up by Rye Lane and the railway station. And then I needed them to come across because a trustee of mine at the time had said we could use his flat and the landing and the stairwell, all good territory, if you like, for atmosphere. And this young guy, he was, I think, 17 or 18, he was really the creator and the driving force of it. He directed it. And he just stopped and said, "I can't go there." I said, "Man, we're in the middle of a shooting day. We've done these, we've only got to do." Anyway, we made some phone calls, and he got another adult person with him who was part of the dance company that he worked with. And she reassured him, and we always had about 3 adults with the group of teenagers. And they decided to go ahead, and we got it done. But it was exactly as you'd said. It was like an invisible wall. I just crossed the road and went where I was going. He couldn't do it.
And it very much speaks to, even with the work that I do, the constant risk assessing you have to do to understand what those invisible walls might be. So I have an office space in Brixton. But Brixton has also been quite a volatile, violent area. So I always have to be quite mindful of, does the young person even feel safe coming to Brixton? Because if not, then does that mean I need to go to them? And if I need to go to them, do I need to do my own risk assessment? Because even though I'm talking about being a 34-year-old man that's removed from it, that doesn't mean violence still can't come my way. The sad thing about the population that I work with, who tend to be lots of young black boys and young black men, is that I will represent the very threat they are trying to get away from. Because the violence that's often enacted on them is other young black boys and men. So there's a lot of an identity bit of work that I need to do with the young people I work with, so that they can see me as a safe role model. But then that also then means it extends and generalizes to black men generally. They can't only ever see black men as threats, because they can't live their lives like that.
No. Well, that's terrible.
Very much so.
How has that come about?
I think it's just the everyday reality of the violence they're exposed to. So if this is the unfortunate nature of community violence in London in particular, and I don't want this to be perceived as it's a black problem, because it's not. There are loads of different people from backgrounds who are caught up in community violence. But what I feel like I can confidently say, also based on my own experience, is that a lot of the violence that is enacted to black boys is other black boys. So when that occurs, the mind automatically creates a bias and a lens towards black boys and black men and seeing them as threats. So when they're in that hypervigilant state and they're constantly detecting threats, black boys and black men will feature in that.
Yeah, inevitably. So it's not a black community thing. It's more a consequence of the randomness of life.
Yeah. And actually, I wouldn't say it's a black community thing. I often talk about the ends, ends culture, where this is where it's intertwined with socioeconomic status. It's twined with class. It's racism. There are so many isms that are intertwined with what occurs within the ends, but people only tend to focus on race, which I find quite fascinating. Yeah, you don't find many middle class people living in ends, which then means you won't find many middle class people caught up in community violence.
Is ends generally housing estates?
What is ends? Somebody asked me this quite. I think it's a culture.
I thought it was geographic. Actually.
No, I don't think it needs to be geographic at all. Okay. Yeah, I would refer to it as a culture. I think geography plays a part in it, and the local, I guess your living environment can play a part in that. But I think ends transcends just the geography of a housing estate.
Because the young guy not able to cross the road to go to do the next bit of filming, that's geographic.
100%.
So it's in my language, that was a postcode war.
Yeah. But even if we stick with that, that isn't then just the housing estate or the housing association. It's a whole area that a young person feels like they can't go to because it belongs to somebody else.
Yeah, and that belonging is a notion tied to money and drug selling, or something else.
I think it's tied to anything and everything. It could be tied to control, wanting to ensure. So, if somebody is a gang member of, let's say, Peckham, and they don't, and I guess they have decided that the whole of Peckham belongs to them or their gang or whatever it might be. Part of that is, of course, for survival and self-preservation. They don't want harm coming to themselves, so they've set a boundary in which nobody can enter in order to make themselves feel safe. It isn't just about the nefarious activities. There's also something about trying to mitigate against risk.
Yeah. An island of calm.
100%. And even then, they're probably not calm, but it's mitigated some level of the potential threat and risk that could occur. And I guess there's something around narratives. So if you push a narrative that nobody can come to this area because blah, 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 this will happen, that will happen, people will feed into that and they won't come. If they don't come, you feel somewhat calmer because people aren't coming to your place. It's quite common sense when you think about it.
Yeah, no, I get it. And thank God there's people like you around who are attempting to unwind the psychological distorting that life has been inflicting.
Yeah.
Are there enough of other people around, we've touched on it once, who can make early interventions that can prevent at least some of that psychological screwing up?
Yeah.
We had a little conversation about family and village.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get into, what should we say, some kind of education environment at 4 or 5 years old, is that an area that you think, in an ideal world, you'd wave your Harry Potter wand and make something happen that isn't happening?
Agreed. Yeah. So
what kind of thing would you go for?
So I guess I do a lot of work with a charity called Powder Fight, who work in secondary schools, so not primary schools, secondary schools, with the overall aim of trying to reduce violence that affects young people, but from a very preventative stage.
Is that focused on South London?
Yeah. So it's Peckham, I guess. So we're based in Peckham. 3 charter schools, so schools that fall under the same trust. And I guess we've been quite intentional with remaining in South East London because that's where what the charity's known. Its inception was 2019. So from that point, Ben Lindsay, who's the CEO, he has a very good relationship within the Southeast area, and there's something about the promotion of cultural sensitivity where we didn't want to go to different areas in London because we don't know them. There's something about knowing the village that you are part of and trying to contribute something within it.
Yeah.
So we very much stuck within South East London. So we work in 3 secondary schools at the moment, and it's one about trying to educate young people about some of those risk factors that can impinge on them generally in terms of their mental health, their well-being, their sense of connection actually, which can then often lead people towards community violence. Whilst that's going on, we try to provide some psychoeducation to their parents and carers. A lot of parents and carers, as we all know, if we have kids or don't have kids, it's a very different generation. And actually the things that we did at school, young people aren't doing the same at school. So there's a big gap between generations thinking, and a lot of parents don't actually know, for example, the social media apps that young people are exposed to. They might have heard the big ones like TikTok, Instagram, but do they know about Discord? Do they know about Telegram? I highly doubt it. And these are really these have become platforms that groomers and exploiters are using because they're I guess more unregulated than the other social media platforms I've mentioned. But lots of young people will have access to all of this stuff that their own parents and carers don't understand. So part of our workshops is also educating parents and carers to just better understand some of the, again, risk factors that might be impinging on their children.
Are you getting the sense that there are benefits slowly accruing from these interventions?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So we track change in terms of emotional well-being, distress, from the young people at the start of the project to the end. So we're able to document and track that change and seeing very positive outcomes actually. I guess the hard part about prevention is that you don't know the impact you've had until 10, 20 years down the line to see the knock-on effect on community violence. But what I will say is the violence reduction unit, I think it was, I don't know if it was this year or last year, no, it must have been last year, mentioned that over the summer period they had one of the lowest rates of violence or homicides. I think, I want to say between 14 to 25, I can't remember the age range. But I guess for me, that just speaks to the fact that lots of community organisations are doing really effective work that's having a knock-on effect on the violence levels we're seeing across the board, possibly. So when we're talking about prevention, I know it's hard to think about it because prevention's very, very pre-stage, but I think we are slowly seeing the differences it's having on violence that affects young people generally.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is that you as practitioners believe in what you're doing.
Oh, 100%.
Because then at least what you're doing and championing is going out in the best form.
100%. And I guess the difficult thing that can often be with prevention is you have to always be thinking about the end goal. Because in the midst of the prevention work, you might feel like, what impact am I having here? Or the impact might be very particular around mental health or the well-being, the stuff that you can track quite quickly. But when you're thinking about violence and violence affecting young people, that's a longer game. And actually we don't know what we're doing. We can ultimately presume based on all of the evidence, based on the research that's come beforehand, but we won't necessarily see that outcome until like 10 years. And even then, it's not like we're doing a longitudinal study to track that change. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that needs to happen somehow, doesn't it?
Requires money, doesn't it? It requires money, requires backing and support.
Yeah, from government level. Really.
I would say so, very much so.
Have you got political interest in this work?
Slowly, we're trying to get there. As a charity, I think we're in a very good position to receive some additional support on that.
Because the founder was a man of faith, I think.
Yeah.
Are you as a man of interest?
I am, yeah.
Right, okay, well, it doesn't surprise me. Because a couple of years ago I started something. It was actually in this very, very community space we're sitting in. And I wanted to have a roundtable discussion with some prominent local people that I'd come to know over my longish time here in this same area. And I wanted to do a roundtable on community and faith. And when I sent this email out to 3 people, I thought I'd try them: a borough commander, a lifelong campaigner, and one other. I can't remember who the first person was. And I wrote faith with a small f / capital F, so that, because it seemed to me that you didn't have to be integrating with formal organised religion to have faith in something beyond yourself, which might just be faith in the village, in inverted commas, which would be a really valid entity to aspire to please or coordinate with, to tune into and become active with. I think being active seems to me to be something that is so valuable.
Very important.
Just wanted to recall that a 15-year-old boy I saw walking along with 2 or 3 slightly younger boys. They were all part of a project called From Boyhood to Manhood, run by an impressive lady called Decima Francis back in the day. And it was based in Peckham. And it was for black kids, particularly, who had been excluded from school. And she and a guy, Wanu Sechmi, I think his name was, an unusual name. And they worked with these, awkward kids, pupil referral units experience, and I'd been in Prues quite a lot, so this was an early taste for me. And Decima explained that it's not celebrities and rock stars and footballers that young boys are going to look up to. It's their peers, maybe, or their uncle, somebody close to them in daily life that can really have, the connection is real. And I watched this 15-year-old boy, and we were walking along, and a rather large girl went by on a bicycle, and one of the boys got very lippy. And this 15-year-old tore this guy off a strip. And the boy took it. He looked totally ashamed and walked on, head down a bit, collected himself and carried on. But the slightly older boy was the one that clearly the slightly younger guy had a respect for. But the 15-year-old was a grown-up.
But you raised a good point that a lot of young people won't be aspiring to be these footballers or whoever it might be. It's those in close proximity to them that they have that regular access to. That's what they will be looking up to. And this again goes back to the village. If the village doesn't exist, who are they aspiring towards?
But I wanted to move on to the UK Trauma Council. That looks to me like quite a feather in a young guy's cap, that you've been you've been acknowledged for your contribution to the whole field of clinical psychology. Am I right in reading it that way?
Yeah, I'm extremely proud actually. So there aren't many, if any, people championing the trauma, PTSD, community violence stuff as a clinician, as a clinical psychologist. The profession has very much been associated for a long period of time with white middle class women, actually. So having a black male, working class, but I guess no longer working class because of the external perception of where I now see myself, or where society sees me.
You're a doctor with about 23 letters off your name.
So I can't, but that's a whole separate conversation, because I often talk about the internalized identity of coming from a working class background and actually infiltrating a middle class profession, but still somewhat feeling working class within that dynamic. But that's a whole different ball game we don't need to get into.
It'd be fun though.
Probably would be, yeah. But the UK Trauma Council, that, if I'm honest, it's been quite a powerful badge that I now hold. So it's a body of academics, researchers, practitioners with some level of expertise in childhood trauma. And I've very much been recognised for the work that I've been doing with this very villainized, ostracized population.
A particular age group?
Not necessarily the age group. It's more about the fact that people don't tend to be able to work with this population. So there's been a lot of fascination around how I've been able to do this, and also just a bit of curiosity. So a lot of people reach out for me to do training, workshops, consultancy bits. I'm all over the place.
And that's where your CIC, the PTSD, comes in, is it?
Yes, exactly.
The consultancy work.
Yeah. So PTSD, Psychologist the Streets Deserve, that came from me and my business partner, who's also a clinical psychologist, Dr Amber. We obviously have worked in many different NHS environments, and we never saw young people who've been caught up in community violence, even though they probably would have benefited from access to some of those services. I've worked in brain injury services, and when I think about the impact of young people getting caught up in violence and having knocks to the head, a brain injury service would actually be quite a helpful environment for them to explore traumatic brain injuries that might have occurred from the proximity to violence. Why was I not seeing them there? When I think about black men generally, who often make up high percentages within prisons and mental health hospitals, when I was working in the community mental health team, why wasn't I seeing black men there? Which is closer to prevention than it is to crisis point. Why was I not seeing black men there? So I was exposed to lots of spaces where, again, my curiosity was coming into play. Why am I not seeing this population here? And actually, through conversation with them, they were like, these services aren't built for us. We don't feel comfortable accessing these services. So that then prompted me to create some level of provision.
Oh, I see. So there's a sort of self-excluding going on, is there?
But I don't think it's self-excluding. I think services haven't designed themselves to be attractive to young people generally.
Right. And so is that teenage that you're thinking of when...
Teenage, adults, both.
I was going to say adults.
Yeah.
So the Trauma Council, what particularly, was there one project that brought you to the attention of the people on that group?
So probably the research that I did called The Life of a Top Boy, which was quite conveniently named because a lot of people have watched the show Top Boy on Netflix, which kind of showcases ends culture, as it were, and community violence. But the research that I created and calling it The Life of a Top Boy was wanting people to understand some of those things that you don't see, that aspect of trauma and PTSD that lots of young boys, young men have experienced by virtue of proximity to violence.
Sorry, is Top Boy, does that refer to being a sort of super gang leader?
No, I don't think it needs to be.
Right.
So I guess maybe in the show itself it referred to that. But I think a top boy can be anybody that has a bit of a chip on their shoulder based on the hierarchies that exist within their group dynamic. They don't need to be the top guy, but they can be a top guy.
Yeah, I want to know what payday is for you. And I'm not talking money, obviously. You know, what really is the big reward when you see it or hear about it for all you do?
Reframing narratives. The big reward for me is when I can see systems adapt and change how they see this population because they're now holding in mind victim and perpetrator. So I do a lot of work with the criminal justice system, where I will do reports around mental health, around cognitive functioning for young people who might have been caught up in this type of violence. And this has been quite powerful for me to see a rigid system like the criminal justice system now thinking slightly differently about how they view somebody who's committed a crime. Of course, people need to be held accountable for their crimes, the perpetrator side of things. But I'm now seeing firsthand the criminal justice system being more thoughtful around wanting to understand the victim identity these people might also hold.
Over what period of time are we talking? How long ago did you decide to write Life of a Top Boy?
So Life of a Top Boy was done in 2023. Yeah. As part of my doctoral thesis, and then I created with Uvenis, who's an organisation in Brixton.
Which is where you do 2 days a week, right?
Yes, on the Thursday and a Friday. So we created kind of like a visual report that could be disseminated quite easily to people, because I highly doubt anyone would want to read my 36,000 word thesis. I mean, they can do if they want. You can go online and read it. But we wanted to create something quite quick and simple and digestible that people could understand some of those kind of high level points within the research itself. That's where I do my direct clinical work with the population we're talking about,
right?
Where I would be doing trauma and PTSD work. And I guess these are young boys, young men who've got to a point in their lives where they want to make that transition from moving away from the violence towards being what they would call a civilian.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that them coming to you, or have you found places that you have to go?
No,
to
they
meet
come
them?
to me. Yeah. It's really powerful. So I guess this is why it's quite nice that within Lambeth, they recently awarded me, Lambeth Council recently awarded me with I think it's called a Civic Award for keeping Lambeth safe. So there's something about the borough acknowledging the work that I have been trying to do with this group of young people.
Right.
But it's usually kind of self-referral. So we've built quite good relationships with Red Thread. I don't know if you know about them.
Yeah, I know of them. Yeah.
So when you think about the trajectory of their access to young people, it would usually be a young person who's been quite horrifically attacked and would end up in hospital. So at that point, there are hospital-based psychologists that could help do some of the intervention. But lots of young people might not necessarily respond to that. But Red Thread kind of keep contact with them once the young person has left hospital. So at that point, they might say to that young person, "Oh, I know a clinical psychologist who, if you wanted to think about some of this stuff, at a later point, you could reach out." And then that's when I would get involved.
Right. What do you hope for? Because you know, you're staring, and have done for a large part of your life, at some very difficult things that humanity contrives to do. What keeps you going?
Hope. Delusional hope, I kind of often refer to it as. But I guess just a hope that things can change. I want to be out of a job.
Yeah.
I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life.
Correct.
Whilst I have the age on my side, the fire and the desire on my side, I want to keep going. But I very much know at some point that will fade. It's just a reality. I can't keep being exposed to so much vicarious trauma through hearing all of these different experiences. So I would hope that I am out of a job, and by that it means lots of young people have been supported way before the crisis point of which they've entered a lifestyle of community violence.
So to get anywhere near that aim, who do you most want to sit down with next? Who would? It's not the local MP or anything, is it? It needs to be.
No, it doesn't feel like
It's
that.
not an archbishop.
But the problem is, it's not one person though. I think that's my biggest issue. I don't know if it can be one person. Going back to the village, it often feels like I need a room of community stakeholders, village stakeholders, but by that, of course, that could be government, it could be the local auntie down the road who has influence. That I need to be in a room with that collective who are willing to make change and do something different. I think for me, the issue is we are stuck in our ways and in the status quo as a society, which means we really get nervous to implement new ways of doing things.
It seems to me we need to make it work within a community, whatever that size is. When I was dreaming up a community media project, I determined it should be no bigger than a borough. And I've been based in Southwark, so I made it about Southwark. And so I created Southwark.tv, which was a website. And local people could get involved and did. It needs to be something, whatever you think, because you're obviously so much at the heart of this very difficult work. What geographic spread could function if you've got people in a space like this, say, around one table? It's got to be in person to really inspire people.
But I don't think it's necessarily about the locality per se. It's about the systems. I don't know if you're aware of
but you're creating the village, aren't you?
But I don't think the village needs to be about the locality. So when I'm talking about this village in particular, for me it's about influential stakeholders across society. So I don't know if you're aware of Bromford Brenner's ecological model.
Don't think so.
So it's just this idea of you have a child that's located within a nested structure of systems. So you've got a child in the middle and lots of concurrent circles around them. That's what we call it. So the first system is the microsystem, and that's the system that the child has close access to. This would be any single person that the child can literally speak to, their friends, their family. If I was working with them as a psychologist, I would be part of their microsystem. The next layer is the mesosystem, and this is where it often talks about communication. So it's asking what connections or lack of connections exist between the child's microsystems. So if I'm working with a child and I'm their microsystem, their parents are obviously their microsystem. maybe not obviously, but are the microsystems.
Ideally.
The mesosystem is asking, what interaction do I have with their parents? And if not, why not? And if not, how does the child make sense of that?
Yeah.
Because, again, going back to the village, the mesosystem is vital here. The mesosystem is the village, ultimately.
Yeah, but that's why I think it needs to be a physical village.
No, I don't dispute the physical, but I'm saying... So when I'm saying locality, I'm saying it doesn't need to be people that are all from one borough, if that makes sense. That's what I'm also talking about.
Okay.
So if we were thinking about Peckham as one... Or Southwark, sorry, as one borough, I'm saying the village doesn't need to include only Southwark residents. I'm thinking about those influential people.
No, I'd want you in my village.
but I guess I would want to be there as somebody that has power to enact what the village needs, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and
so this is where I'm thinking about. Okay,
so the Southwark example stands at the moment, and you stand as an example of what you're just describing.
Agreed, but I'm still caveating that with you need government officials who oversee the whole country. It can't just be about Southwark.
Yeah, but I always think start small, grow big. So
I don't know if we can with this type of work there, and that's my only issue. So because it's all interconnected. So even if we think about the school to prison pipeline, I would need education ministers who have the power to think about what school does and how it minimises young people being excluded. I can't necessarily do that at a local level. I need to think about it at a DFE level to think systemically about what is the DFE enforcing to schools to ensure they do not exclude schools. If you stop kids being excluded, you then possibly stop that whole pipeline from occurring. If young people are still getting caught up in that, who do we have within the criminal justice system at a high stakeholder level who can be thinking about what does rehabilitation look like? So for those young people who have done stuff that obviously need to go to prison, is prison still fit for purpose? Because if it's not, you're creating just a whole loop of things that don't work. And this is what I'm saying about you need key stakeholders in all of these systems that surround young people, or it won't work. It can't work.
Yeah. Now you work, as it happens, in Lambeth and in Southwark. Lambeth and Southwark share one policing area as part of the Met, so Area South. That means that it has to be possible to construct a worthwhile in-person project for the beneficiaries with the in-person relationships with specialists that can be written up or monitored already from the get-go by the people at the level above.
Yeah, agreed.
So you start with a small village because you're never going to get big money to come in one go across a whole country.
No, agreed.
But can we afford to keep waiting?
No, but I think even with the small village, so even if we think about the Met within South London, that's covering Southwark and Lambeth, it can't just be about policy. There has to be training. And again, this is where...
Training for whom?
Police officers.
Oh, right, okay.
So when somebody is entering the police system, what are we doing to understand how the media has shaped that police officer's perception of community violence? We're all still human beings, irrespective of the professions and titles that we hold. It's the same reason, as a clinical psychologist, I can walk down the road, see a group of black boys and still feel a visceral response. I understand that comes from somewhere. Just because I'm a doctor in clinical psychology doesn't mean I'm immune from it. We don't have enough conversations with professionals across the board to understand the biases they hold.
Okay. Part of that project on life crime I ran more recently, I ended up working with Elevated Minds, a very active local group run by a lady from North London. She, at the behest of 3 young boys who were all very, very close to being permanently excluded from their school, the boys came up with an idea. They wanted to be part of training the police.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why isn't it safe to be a child here in Southwark?
Everything we do came from the young people in the first place.
It's called change of thought, and the phrase came out of the mouth of what turned out to be the most articulate and the prominent one of the 3 boys.
There has been cases of boys in my school who the teachers wasn't they looked down on them. They didn't want to help them, and they just got a section. Then it's like they got picked out of everyone else, and then they just laugh it down at them.
I've filmed a lot of interviews in my life as a professional program maker. His was outstanding. He was so relaxed and focused. He spoke with great honesty about life at school and what he saw and the kind of nihilism that fired up a lot of the boys that were his peers. But that in part that nihilism was co-created by a need to put money on the table because they would think their mum didn't and was struggling to pay, blah, 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 blah. And so you realise nothing ain't simple. This is really complicated.
Agreed.
There are so many factors.
Yeah, agreed.
But the point of this intervention of mine was to say that Javel and the other two stood up in front of junior officers who hadn't quite completed their training. And they were, you'll either be down the road from us here at Peckham Police Station, that was a big meeting room that we filmed in, or a different part of the same building.
To actually have someone in front of you telling you their story, it's completely different to reading it or hearing about it on social media.
But there, for me, lies the problem, because you've already mentioned junior officers. Why? Why junior officers?
They were still completing their training.
But I think this, for me, is when we are thinking about how systems work, how relationships work, power within those systems, a newly qualified police officer isn't going to have the same level of power as a highly established, ranked police officer. So you can teach a newly qualified these ideals, but they're going into a system that's been enforced and created by people who might not share or even know that same mentality. And that, for me, is where the problem lies.
I think I saw two sets of brains engage in that interaction in a training session, which I was allowed
I think
to
you
film.
would do. Yeah.
And both were obviously changed for the benefit. The young police officers in training, I caught some words with some of them. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
They were blown away, and they had instant respect for these young kids. And
That
the young
I don't
kids
dispute.
grew.
That I don't dispute. So when I've done work with prison officers and police officers, I see how toxic those environments can be. So whilst on the one hand I'm quite thankful, and I can see the beautiful nature of having a space to think about those things with newly qualified officers who I guess you would hope can bring some of that mentality to when they become powerful people. They are still entering a system that might not share the same thoughts, and that is problematic when you think about power and how power translates down to people.
Power does translate down, but change can percolate upwards, can't it?
Completely, but I would say within those systems, I don't know how often that actually is the case, if I'm honest. And this is something that's been within the prison system for a long period of time to understand, and I'm saying more the prison system, to understand that when you have people entering a system that thinks a very particular way, if you introduce a different way of thinking, you are often villainized and ostracized yourself. So then what becomes safety, if we're thinking from a trauma perspective, is you adhere to those things that you might not subscribe to. And that's where the moral injury comes into play. I would say a lot of professionals struggle with moral injury because they are entering systems that don't necessarily operate the way they would like, but they still need to survive themselves as an individual. So maybe I'm being a bit cynical there.
Yeah, some journeys you just have to start, even though you can't
completely
see very far down the road, can you? But if you can see a first step, then you make the first step, and then because you know you're going to be somewhere new, and then you look around and you think, oh yeah, it'll be over there, and you can only do it one step at a time.
Agreed. I agree with that.
So Ron, I want you around the table.
I am happy to be around the table.
I'm going to write to you.
I am more than happy to be around the table, but I'm caveating that with it needs to be around the table with people in society who have the power to create the change that will ripple down to communities.
Yeah, we need who can make a noise and who have some respect.
100%.
And finally, from me, I mean, I think the people. A changing event for me was putting on a public event. Loads of adults came. I think I mentioned it to you in conversation before. 2 boys came from a pupil referral unit. One didn't speak, the other did. That young boy changed my mind about it. He didn't say very much, But I went away changed, and I thought, and then I created a completely different project, and I still feel that's the way to go, because you're getting professionals into areas where they listen.
Yeah.
And the young people of now, having had that experience myself, are incredibly powerful when they tell their story.
100%.
You know, I have pictures of some of these 16 and 17, no, they were 15 and 16, they were year 11, talking about looking out of their window across the road, and they didn't want to see what was there.
Yeah.
You know, I think it just makes you weep.
Yeah.
Let's end on a good note. What kind of good note can you come up with, Ron? We've put people through a turbulent hour. What can we hope for? What's realistic for you?
No, I think the village is realistic. I think the village is realistic. I think it requires us to go back to a time where we were more loving towards one another. I feel like society now generally is just, we're all crabs in a bucket. We're all fighting each other, we're trying to compete for resources. I think that's organisations as well as individuals, actually, which then means the love, the support, the guidance doesn't exist as much as I would like. So I just think, I don't know how, and this is again where maybe when we come as a group, it's thinking about what does that look like? How do we do that on a wider scale, so that if I see a young person misbehaving, I feel safe and confident to challenge that young person, to get him to think about the possible consequences of his actions, as opposed to recording it or walking away. Because what does that really do?
Yeah, there's a way of de-escalating a
100%. But I also understand that it requires quite a skill set to feel confident to de-escalate.
It does.
So maybe it's about teaching the average person that skill set. So maybe it's about us all feeling more confident to de-escalate situations.
Yeah, believing in what we think is right, to be right, and speaking for it. It's not an ego trip, is it? It's,
at all. No, not at all.
This is so wrong that you're going with young man or young girl, you know.
Yeah.
You haven't thought about this. I'm telling you, you should just do that before you do anything else.
Agreed.
Ron, it's been a pleasure. I knew it would be.
Thank
you for doing this podcast. And I'm going to write to you.
They say I did all that I could, but there's this feeling I did less